On this special episode of Supercars Talk, I'm going to do a deep dive into the racing entitlements contracts. Recently, I've had a few questions about the RECs in supercars, that is the racing entitlements contracts. A few people asking because of the talk of there's 24 licenses at the moment. Why can't we just have more? How much do they cost? How many is there? And things like that. So I thought I'd have a little bit of a deep dive into it and a bit of the history and things like that. To be honest, a lot of this is out of my memory bank. Didn't do a lot of research on this, so if I get anything slightly wrong, please, tell me down in the comments what I've got wrong. But the REC system was introduced as a license thing back in 1999, and it was essentially, I suppose, a commitment to the sport. And you had a level 1, level 2 and level 3 license back in the old days. I think level 1s you could run multiple cars under the license, but you had to run the whole season. Level 2, I think you could run one car for the whole season. I think level 3, that might have been back when there was a special like Privateers Cup where they had special tyres and things like that. You didn't have to turn up to all the events. I don't think you got a percentage of the prize money pie and stuff. It was just essentially you could turn up. As far as I remember, the guys who had been running the full season the previous few years, they just got a license. I don't think there was an actual buy-in or anything at the start. The original teams, now this is some interesting reading here. The original level 1 teams were Dick Johnson Racing, Gary Rogers Motorsport, Gibson Motorsport, Glenn Seaton Racing, John Faulkner Racing, the Holden Racing Team, which is Walkinshaw Racing, Lansvale Smash Repairs, Mark Larkham Racing, Tony Longhurst Racing, Perkins Engineering, Romano Racing and Stone Brothers Racing. So essentially the only two teams that are still continuing essentially as they started are Dick Johnson Racing and the Holden Racing Team, or Walkinshaw. DJR has bounced around a bit over the years. Glenn Seaton's operation is now the Tickford operation. Stone Brothers Racing is Erebus. Perkins is Kelly Racing, although if you actually tracked which licenses, the Perkins ones have probably moved on, and the Kelly ones are probably the ones that are running there, which I think is from the John Faulkner license originally. Anyway, so these things have bounced around a lot over the time. I think the only one that has consistently not changed at all has been the Walkinshaw one, has run straight through, I think, but there was a bit of a mess there with the whole Tom Walkinshaw going under, but I don't think that affected the HRT cars. I think that was more the Kelly cars that were then running as the third and fourth cars under, because you could, at one point you could run 4 cars on your level 1 license, or you could, there were guys that were turning up on a level 1 only running 1 car. Anyway, at some point it got split so that each car had its own license. There was none of this turn up and run. The level 2s got dissolved and everyone ended up on the same playing field. So essentially the license is that now you can race a car in V8 supercars. You have to turn up to every race. There is penalties if you don't turn up. There is a bit of force majeure if you, say, destroy a car one weekend and can't get a new one for the next. But I think the penalties are pretty high. So we've had situations like where Lee Holdsworth trashed the Charlie Shirk. I'll give up on that for the minute because I'm struggling to pronounce that today. When he trashed that car at Darwin, they then borrowed essentially a Kostecki car and raced with Kostecki at the next couple of rounds because they had to turn up. And because you turn up all year, you get a slice of prize money. So the amount of prize money varies depending on who you hear and who you talk to and things like that. Pre-Archer Capital buying in, I think the prize money could be anywhere from $1 to maybe $2 million a year. Post Archer buying in, I think there was one year where there wasn't actually any money coming back in. The figures more recently have probably been around the 500-ish thousand to the $1 million mark, which Supercars gets money from the TV deal, from sponsorships, from circuits, things like that, and then the pie gets divided up and goes to the teams, which I'll get into that a bit more in a second. So previously it was all owned by the Supercars teams and Tony Cochran and Tiga and things like that. Quite a few years back now, they sold 65% of the whole thing to Arch Capital. So essentially, to make it quite simple, if Supercars was making $100 million for the year and there were 25 licenses, that means you got $4 million of the pie. Nowadays, because you've sold 65% of it to Arch Capital, so there's only $35 million of that pie to divide between the teams, so that would be a little bit over $1 million for each team. In effect, Archer bought it for $300 million or something at the time, so it was a bit of a payday, especially if you had a couple of licenses. You got a fair chunk of cash at the time. So that's a bit on that. The teams, why they're reluctant to extend on, or why some of them are reluctant to extend on that 24 car model at the moment, is because say there's $24 million of prize money, or there's $24 million of revenue to divide between the teams this year. That means they all get $1 million each. If there's 26 cars running, that means that, can't do the maths without a calculator, but say they all get $950,000 instead. And then if it's 28 cars, they might get, $930,000 or something like that. And then if there's 30 cars, they might get $900,000 each. So that's why there is a little bit of resistance from some of the teams to have more cars. I think that's a little bit selfish from some of the team owners. Maybe be trying to pull costs out of it some other way and have more cars on the field to keep the fans happier. That's just my opinion though. So how did we get down to 24 cars? Well, for years and years and years, Tony Cochran had a magic number of 28. And I think this had something to do with pit lane capacities and where they thought the money was at and revenue for all the teams and all this kind of thing. So he worked really hard over the years to gradually step it back. I think they were running at about 32 or something like that when the whole level 1, level 2 system got dissolved. And then he gradually got it back to his magic 28. And then over the last few years, a few have been handed back, like the other year when Triple Eight decided not to run the third car, and then Tickford, they gave up their fourth car and brought Red 23 in-house. Then that was when it went from 26 back to 24. So those two licenses are still sat with Supercars. I think the 27th and 28th have kind of been dissolved. Essentially, though, it's a thing if someone wanted to buy in, I can't see... If the right person was trying to buy in, I can't see why they would stop that. Like when Triple Eight wanted an extra license to run Craig Lowndes, no one was saying no to that. It was basically like, well, yeah, give us some money and here you go. You can go and run in the field. The car numbers are attached to the license, so you'll find like Jamie Whincup gets his 88. The Triple Eight could essentially get their Triple Eight back if they wanted to. Dick Johnson gets his 17, but funnily enough, because Charlie Schwerkolt, he co-owned Dick Johnson Racing with Dick, and then they had a falling out, so part of the settlement was Charlie got a license, and that's why his car runs 18, because that was a special number to Dick, and that was a little bit of a, you know, spite, taking that number away from the team, and I think that's probably why his team's called Team 18 these days, even though he runs number 20. But yeah, you can obviously change numbers, like, you know, Shane Van Gisbergen's, he's run 97, even though he's gone across different licenses, and he's kept that number, whereas some guys, like, it'd be interesting to see what happens at Kelly Racing when they announce their new driver, depending when this comes out, whether the driver's actually been announced or not, but whether they stick at 7 and 15 or whether they go something different. But yeah, it becomes, it's not too big a deal, and the Charlie one is probably the only time where it's become a real issue, where people have wanted to use a number and other people have said, no, you can't use it because, you know, I've got my knickers in a twist because we had a falling out. How much does a license cost? Well, something's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. So back in the day, there was some ridiculous figures bouncing around where some possibly changed hands for around $2 million, maybe even more. There was actually a point as well where I think Larry Perkins sold his level 1 license for ridiculous money, bought level 2 license for essentially nothing, and then it got upgraded to a level 1 license because of the results or something like that, or when it all got disbanded, and yeah, he put a heap of money in his back pocket over that. They're definitely not worth what they were once previously. I'd imagine if you wanted to go and buy one at the moment, you'd probably be looking around $500,000 or something if you were to hand one back, and Supercars was going to essentially dissolve it and buy it back off you. You're probably going to get cents in the dollar off that as well. I don't think they're too forthcoming with a heap of cash if you're just handing them back these days. There is also a little bit of confusion out there about running a REC, and what you can do is lease one out to someone or lease one off someone to run your team, but you can only lease one out for a maximum of 2 years. So Charlie, when he split with Dick Johnson, he actually leased his license back to Dick Johnson for 2 years, but once those 2 years were up, then Charlie either he had to start running it himself or essentially forfeit the license. So that's where he started with his team, and then I think at the time Dick Johnson started leasing another one off someone, until the whole Penske thing came in and they finally bought back their licenses. Then there is also the difference, like when Jason Bright, he was running his own team, and then he decided, I don't want to run my own team anymore. He went to drive at Stone Brothers with his license, and then he essentially moved to Brad Jones Racing, and he was racing as one of the Brad Jones cars, while Brad Jones was then running his license kind of in-house. That wasn't a lease agreement. That was, it's a bit hard, but getting someone else to run the car for you, a bit like what Blanchard's been doing, where now Blanchard wants to go and run his own team, but that's not a lease agreement. That's, you know, placing your license there and kind of running it. It's a little bit confusing, but between the letter of the law, it's totally different. So you can, in the Blanchard situation, you could run your car there indefinitely, as long as the money adds up. So that's a little bit of a look at the history and what a REC kind of is. If you've got any more questions on the subject, please down in the comments ask me. I can do a follow-up on this video, Supercars Torque at gmail.com, and hit me up on Instagram. I have been doing a little bit of posting on there, not much. The season's over at the moment, and I'm just kind of getting into it, so be patient with me. But until next time, I'm still Tubby Dave, and I'll see you later.